Our romance novel, Save the Galaxy, by Ariana De Rote. Chapter 72, Jaster 13, Holdan 6. The wrap-up after a battle was the worst part in Jaster's opinion. The adrenaline was fading, injuries were coming to light. Case in point, Vizsla had singed his elbow at some point and Jaster hadn't even noticed. The names of the dead were being gathered by Django, who would deliver them to Jaster for remembrances when they got back to Mandalore. There were queues near every medic for treatment. His people were very happy he had the Darksaber. Thrilled they got to see Jedi in battle, especially as those who weren't busy got around to posting their Boucher footage on the Jedi net, and angry that Vizsla had gotten away yet again. Jaster was among the latter, but trying to tamp it down by reminding himself of their good fortune. Barring a few children lost in an explosion, they had gotten all the Ada out of the mine, including the Jetika. And despite Tor Vizsla fleeing, with Jaster now in possession of the Darksaber by right of combat, Clan Vizsla, according to their own beliefs that whoever held the Darksaber was the rightful ruler of Mandalore, would have to swear the raison d'etre to him. In fact, some of Deathwatch had done it right there while his people cheered his victory. Jaster had them in custody anyway, since they'd need ample retraining and time in therapy before he'd let them at his back. Jocasta had been cornered by a number of weapons-enthusiastic Verde and had been drawn into what sounded like a fascinating lecture on Jedi weaponry that Jaster had been reluctant to tear himself away from. He had made a mental note to get a copy of it from someone's boucher, then gone on with his duties, checking on his people. Comare Vosa, meanwhile, had looked grateful to be rescued from the lecture by Jan, who directed her to help the medics. Jan was still at his side, a tall, imposing shadow, though the intimidation was somewhat lost on Jaster's Verde. Jaster had a smirk every time one of them clapped the Jedi on the arm or shoulder in solidarity, or congratulations after a battle well fought. Jan stiffened every time, like a startled Tuca. By now, Jaster was making his way back to check on how the new Mandalorians and the rescued Etike were doing. He was glad not to find anyone harassing the new Mandos, but the lengths his Verde were going to in order to approach the children was a bit ridiculous. Many of his Verde were queued for the new Mandalorian medics despite barely looking injured. All had their boucher off so as not to scare the kids, and several were blatantly ignoring the medics while they carried food, blankets, clothing, and even toys in their hands. He raised his eyebrows at seeing one of the Verde must have gone into battle with a large stuffed lost wolf on their person. It was being handed reverently to a dangerously skinny Edgar. "It's soft and warm." The ad had big black eyes like a nautilin, and under the lights from the ships their skin had a yellow tint. Two tiny tentacles curled out of a head of blonde hair. The Verd, from Clan Eldar judging by their armor, grinned blindingly. "I carried it near my heart." "Oh, that's why it's stinky," said the ad. There were a lot of choked-off laughs from those paying attention to the bear. The bird wasn't put off. They knelt down so they could be at eye height. "Adika, do you have Bure, parents, waiting for you on Mandalore?" The ad shook their head. "She's one of the 90s, said one of the older teens who was standing nearby. Those were the children from the New Darmanda school who had been abandoned by the Bur and stayed there full-time. "Well then, may I know your name, Adika?" "Erti," she said shyly. "Ertika, I'm Prono Litkar of Clan Eldar, him. I would like to take care of you from now on, as your pur. Would you like that?" She frowned. "But I have ugly eyes and hair, and I'm weak." Jaster's heart went out to her. She had been abused at home, then kidnapped somewhere where she was too young to be useful. "Some people would say my scar is ugly as well," said Porrono, pointing to the line of melted skin down one side of his face, which showed up strongly against his dark skin. He'd been lucky not to lose an eye. "But many others think it's very handsome, and we are all weak when we are young. You will grow stronger." "All right," she said after studying Porrono for a long moment. Porrono relaxed his shoulders. "Nikirtal guy saaderte." "Thank you, Adika." He held out his arms for a hug, which the ad rushed into. More than a few Mandalorians were smiling and cheering at the scene.
"Is that all that is required to adopt a child as a Mandalorian?"
asked Plo Koon, coming up beside him. Jaster thought he detected a hint of wonder in the Keldorian's voice.
"Yes,"
said Jaster. The book didn't actually have an adoption scene in it, come to think of it, what with Yam being missing at the end of the book. Jaster expected it would happen in the sequel, though Nared had certainly contemplated it several times within the book, and obviously already considered Kiri his and Yam's ad. The Keldor stared for a moment longer before breaking out of whatever thought was in his head.
Mandalore, we have news to report.
He had two Attica clinging to his robes.
What is it?
If it was sensitive news, the Jedi would be asking him to talk in private, so the children must already know whatever Plo Koon was going to say.
Several of the children are not New Mandalorian. They appear to have been abducted by Death Watch from planets along the Permian route.
Well, Osric! Jaster felt stupid that it hadn't occurred to him that Death Watch might have started hitting non-Mandalorian targets to boost their numbers. On the other hand, he hadn't heard a word about Death Watch raiding outside of the Mandalorian sector, so Vizsla must have kept this very quiet, but still. Did that mean Death Watch had another Karkin base somewhere out in the galaxy? How were they affording this? Clan Vizsla was probably the richest of the Mandalorian clans due to owning a percentage of the mines on Concordia outright, but funding a huge terrorist organization with ships, weapons, and not one but possibly two secret bases? The minute Clan Vizsla swore there was a lair, Jaster was going to have to audit them. He sighed. Thank you for letting me know, Master Kun. Holdan kept a light hand on Obi-Wan's shoulder as they were entering the Clan Law compound, unable to help himself from touching his ad to be sure he was still there. Obiga had slept the entire short trip from Concordia to Mandalore, and all his lighter bruises were cleared up from the back then. He still looked exhausted, and no wonder, since it was the middle of the night at this point. Mace wasn't with them since he and the other Jedi had to report to the Jedi Council. Mace had suggested Obi-Wan would have a better reunion with his family without his Jedi Master along. Holdan had refrained from pointing out that Clan Law was also Mace's family now. This time. As it was, they were still a big group. His Babadu Lillian had seen how Obi-Wan's squad members were reluctant to be parted from him, and shamelessly jumped on the opportunity. Corinth and Maru were now Ade and full members of Clan Law. Valia was with them as well, though she would simply remain in Clan Law's care until her mental health was well enough for her to decide what she wanted. Unsurprisingly, the Mandalore had declared that therapy was mandatory for any rescued Ade under his jurisdiction. Despite the late hour, most of the clans seemed to be waiting for them once they were through the door, the younger Adika in their sleepwear and dozing on their nearest relative. Everyone started talking at once, and all Holdan could make out were words of welcome mixed in. Even the clan head, Mavona, was at the back, though her smile seemed forced. Holdan suspected the news about her added death watch hadn't been good.
Obiga has bruised ribs, so no hugs.
Holdan barked out when it looked like there would be a surge towards them. His Adika was bright red, but smiling happily at the clan. One of the littlest Adika, a Twi'lek 4 years old, wasn't stopped. I can hug, he said, brightly smiling up at Obi-Wan. Sure enough, he was short enough that his forehead only came level with Obi-Wan's waist. Obi-Wan gently patted his head. That you can't, little one. The 4-year-old proceeded to then give quick hugs to the rest of the returning group and his new Vode. A bunch of adults were shoved aside as the Strill pushed their way through the crowd. They sniffed carefully at Obi-Wan, then licked a long stripe down his face. Obi-Wan scrunched up his nose. Your breath is not as nice as you think it is, my friend, though I'm going to better. He scratched the Strill's head. Introductions and stories in the morning, declared Lillian behind them. Yes, said Apabor. He had pushed his way through the crowd so he could clasp one hand each on the shoulder of his Ad and Buad. Everyone to bed! It was well after midnight when they arrived back on Mandalore. Jaster knew he had dozed off on the short journey back from Concordia. He'd been trying to sort through the preliminary battle reports to help out Jango, and worrying over where Vizsla had fled to, if there were more children to rescue. Then suddenly they were putting down the true Mandalorian complex. He had enough presence of mind to suggest to Jango to set up a victory feast for the next day. The largest public plaza in Keldabe would hold half the city easily, though it was pitted with rubble from bombs and skirmishes with Death Watch. Jango didn't seem nearly as tired as he was. His ad assured him he would get some Verde to organize it, but less tired of them to clear the worst of the rubble from the plaza, spread the word, and get him a full list of casualties so he could leave remembrances for their dead before the feast began. Jaster grinned at his ad and pulled him into a hug, making their armor clank where it made contact. I'm so proud of you, Janika. You led our Verde so well. Bull! Django was blushing, but he clung to the hug for a moment before pulling away. I'll take care of everything. Go to bed. Look, Olor. Jaster teased. It felt like that was the last of his energy for the day. He blindly started pulling off pieces of his armor upon reaching his rooms, then was stripping off his kute when he saw movement in the room. His blaster was in his hand as he blinked at the woman sitting at his desk. Oh, he put the blaster back. You can take his holocron elsewhere for the evening if you like. I'm hitting this sack. Jocasta graced him with a small smile. She seemed to have found the time to shower and change into what looked like lighter robes to him. Her hair was down. I was informing Master Vizsla of our victory, but the rest will wait until tomorrow. He wants to see Obi-Wan, by the way. She approached him, taking over stripping him out of his kute with her own hands. I find it helps after battle to sleep in someone's arms, if you wouldn't be averse. Gladly. He smiled helplessly at her. Go shower, she ordered. He grabbed a light shirt and loose pants to change into. He jumped in the Sonic for the bare minutes it took to wash off the dirt before heading eagerly to bed. She had divined which side he preferred and taken the opposite. It seemed like he had only a moment to appreciate the beautiful woman snuggling into his arms before sleep took him. She woke him with a soft kiss, which soon turned into something more. It was only after he'd finished a belated breakfast that it occurred to him. He could now personally confirm that the Arcane Jedi were just as good at sex as the book said they were. His men really were never going to leave the Jedi alone. Jocasta was poring over a pad as she ate. I forwarded you a report from the council. It seems one of our shadows has stumbled upon Deathwatch's trail. Kara, his Verde were going to cause him so many headaches, but looking at the amazing woman in front of him, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The fortress blew up in front of them, sending their stolen land speeder drifting precariously close to the edge of the cliff. Nared barely noticed, his eyes fixated on the growing flames. Hiam had promised he was right behind them. Where was he? Kiri was a burr stuck to his side as they both stared at the destruction. More secondary explosions were rocking the compound, though Nared couldn't even guess what they were from due to the fortress walls. Come on, Hiam! When a piece of flaming debris came close to their land speeder, Nared finally had to turn away. Getting Kiri to safety was more important. Hiam would follow. He'd have to. He carefully used the land speeder's repulsors to get them off the cliff without tipping either of them over the edge. He took them to the edge of the canyon to a small cave where he and Nared had left his armor while planning their assault. It felt like days, but it had only been a few hours. They waited.